March 16, 1943, the North Atlantic Ocean, 400 miles south of Iceland. The wind does not howl, it screams. A 40-foot wall of green-black water, laced with freezing foam, crashes over the bow of the British destroyer HMS Havelock. The ship shudders violently, metal groaning in protest as it slides down the far side of the massive wave. Inside the cramped sonar hut, Petty Officer Evans grips the brass handles of his ASDIC station. His ears ache from the pressure, and his eyes burn from staring at the faint green line on the cathode ray tube. He has been on watch for 6 hours. He is cold, soaked, and exhausted, but he cannot rest. He is listening for the one sound more terrifying than the storm itself, the faint, rhythmic propeller beat of a German U-boat. Evans and the crew of the Havelock are guarding convoy SC-122. It is a sprawling, desperate collection of 40 merchant ships, struggling to deliver the lifeblood of the war to Britain. Food, fuel, tanks, and ammunition. They are the target, and they are in hell. They have entered the Black Pit, the Mid-Atlantic Gap. This is the most dangerous place on Earth. It is a 1,000-mile-wide dead zone beyond the reach of Allied bomber patrols from Canada, Iceland, or Britain. Down here, there is no air cover. Down here, the U-boats are the masters. Admiral Dönitz, head of the German U-boat fleet, knows this. He has gathered his wolfpacks, his groups of submarines, to wait right here. At 2 a.m., the sonar operator screams, "Contact! Propeller noise, bearing 270. The Havelock leaps forward, its engines thundering. The destroyer cuts through the waves, hunting the contact. But it is a trap. As the Havelock races west to hunt one submarine, a torpedo, fired from another U-boat to the east, strikes the merchant ship USS King Edward. A massive fireball rips the night sky apart, briefly illuminating the horrific scene. A ship torn in two, its bow already pointing towards the ocean floor. For the next 4 days, Admiral Dönitz's Group Raubgraf Wolfpack tears convoy SC-122 to pieces. It is a running, brutal battle. When it is over, 22 merchant ships are at the bottom of the Atlantic. 141,000 tons of vital cargo gone. The Havelock and its escorts are powerless. They are simply shepherds trying to protect their flock from a pack of invisible, invincible wolves. In Washington, D.C. and London, the mood is grim. They are losing the Battle of the Atlantic. Britain is starving. The entire war effort, including the planned D-Day invasion, is on the brink of collapse. They know the answer, the only answer: air power. They need aircraft carriers. Ships that can take planes into the Black Pit, hunt the U-boats where they surface, and protect the convoys. But there is a problem. Fleet carriers like the USS Enterprise are priceless. They are huge, fast, complex, and desperately needed in the Pacific War against Japan. They cannot be spared to hunt submarines in the Atlantic. Then a radical, almost laughable idea emerges. What if, instead of building giant billion-dollar fleet carriers, they just converted merchant ships? Take a simple cargo ship hull, weld a flat wooden deck on top, add a tiny control tower, and just enough fuel and weapons for a few small planes. They would be slow. They would be ugly. They would be vulnerable. The traditional leadership of the U.S. Navy was horrified. Admiral Ernest King, the powerful chief of naval operations, dismissed the idea completely. He called them makeshift substitutes. His admirals called them impractical, floating coffins that would be easy prey for U-boats and would sink in the violent Atlantic storms. The Navy laughed at the idea of these baby flattops. The answer officially was no. But the one man who mattered more than the admirals disagreed. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, overruling his own Navy, saw the desperate genius in the idea. He turned to one man, an industrialist named Henry J. Kaiser, who was famous for building Liberty ships at impossible speeds. The president gave Kaiser an impossible order. Build them all, and build them now. Henry J. Kaiser was not a traditional shipbuilder. He was a construction magnate. He built dams, bridges, and highways. He understood one thing better than anyone else: mass production. When the war began, America did not need a few perfect ships. It needed thousands of adequate ships, and it needed them yesterday. Kaiser applied his construction methods to shipbuilding, revolutionizing the industry. While traditional shipyards built a vessel from the keel up in one spot, a process that took months, Kaiser's yards built ships like cars on an assembly line. Hulls were built in sections. Prefabricated modules, complete with pipes and wiring, were welded together in massive pieces. His methods were fast, cheap, and derided by naval traditionalists. But they worked. His shipyards were famous for building Liberty ships, simple cargo vessels in as little as 4 days from start to finish. When President Roosevelt demanded baby flattops, the Navy admirals scoffed. They estimated it would take at least 2 years to design and build such a ship. Kaiser, legend says, told the president he could build them in 90 days. The admirals were appalled. This was not a cargo ship. This was a complex aircraft carrier, a warship. Kaiser's response was simple. You call them makeshift. I call them expedient, and they will work. The order was given. In late 1942, Kaiser's shipyards began production on a new class of vessel, the Casablanca-class escort carrier. They were, exactly as the admirals had feared, built on a modified merchant ship hull. They were small, only 500 feet long, a fraction of the size of a fleet carrier. They were slow, powered by simple steam engines that could barely make 19 knots. This was often slower than the U-boats they were supposed to hunt. They were cramped, with tiny hangars, minimal armor, and just enough fuel to survive. To the pilots who were assigned to them, these jeep carriers were a terrifying prospect. The flight decks were perilously short. Landing in the violent rolling seas of the North Atlantic was a white-knuckle experience. The wooden decks offered almost no protection from bombs. The crews gave them dark, sarcastic nicknames. The official designation was CVE, for Carrier Escort. But the men who served on them said it really stood for combustible, vulnerable, and expendable. But these ships had one war-winning advantage. There were a lot of them. Kaiser's assembly lines churned them out with breathtaking speed. At the peak of production, his yards were launching a new baby flat top every single week. In just over 12 months, he delivered all 50 ships. The impossible order was filled. While Kaiser's factories built the Casablanca-class, the Navy had already been experimenting with earlier conversions. The first true hunter-killer groups were formed around the Bogue-class escort carriers. These were the pioneers, the first to test the new doctrine. The plan was no longer just to defend the convoy. It was to attack the U-boats. These baby flat tops, like the USS Bogue, would become the center of their own small task force. Accompanied by 3 or 4 destroyers, they would roam the Black Pit, actively hunting the wolfpacks. Their weapon was the Grumman F-4F Wildcat fighter and the Grumman TBF Avenger torpedo bomber. These planes, while not the newest, were tough and reliable. They could be armed with depth charges and, eventually, a new top-secret weapon. This was the FIDO acoustic homing torpedo, a torpedo that could hear the U-boat underwater and guide itself to the target. By May of 1943, the U-boats were at their absolute peak strength. 116 submarines were active in the Atlantic, sinking Allied ships faster than they could be built. The situation was desperate. It was into this desperate, losing battle that the USS Bogue and her sister ships sailed. The admirals had called them Impractical. The pilots called them expendable. Admiral Dönitz and his U-boat captains had no idea what was about to hit them. May 21st, 1943. The Black Pit, mid-Atlantic. The USS Bogue pitches violently in the heavy Atlantic swell. On her short, precarious flight deck, the engine of a Grumman Avenger sputters to life with a cough of blue smoke. The pilot, Lieutenant Junior Grade William Bill Chamberlain, gives a thumbs up to the deck crew, his knuckles white as he grips the controls. His mission? Patrol. Find the U-boats before they find the convoy. This was the new aggressive doctrine in action, no longer waiting for an attack. The Bogue's hunter-killer group was actively searching. High-frequency direction. Finding, or huff-duff, on the destroyers could detect the short radio transmissions from U-boats reporting convoy sightings to Admiral Dönitz. Once a signal was detected, the Bogue would vector in, launching her aircraft to find the submarine. For the U-boat crews, this was a terrifying new development. For years, they had operated with near impunity on the surface. Their submarines were faster on the surface than submerged, and they needed to surface to recharge batteries and use their diesel engines. They felt safe in the Black Pit, knowing no Allied aircraft had the range to reach them. On May 22nd, Chamberlain's Avenger, flying low over the waves, gets a radar contact. A small blip. He banks his plane, heading towards the coordinates. And there it is, a German U-boat, U-569, cruising confidently on the surface. The U-boat's lookouts spot the Avenger at the same time. The German sub's deck gun opens fire, sending tracers streaking past Chamberlain's cockpit. The U-boat commander screams, "Alarm! Tauchen!" The submarine begins its crash dive, but Chamberlain is already in his attack run. He pushes the Avenger's nose down, diving straight at the submarine. He toggles the release. 2 depth charges drop from the bomb bay, landing perfectly on either side of the swirling water where the U-boat had just vanished. Chamberlain circles, waiting. Seconds later, the ocean erupts. 2 massive plumes of water rise, followed by a dark, spreading stain of oil and debris. The USS Bogue had drawn first blood. U-569 never surfaced again. What happened next, in May of 1943, was not a battle. It was a massacre. The baby Flattops, which the admirals had called Impractical, changed the entire dynamic of the war in a matter of weeks. The Black Pit, once a U-boat safe haven, became a death trap. Planes from the Bogue, the Sank, and other escort carriers swarmed the skies. U-boats surfacing to attack convoys were immediately spotted. U-boats surfacing to recharge batteries were pounced on by aircraft appearing out of the clouds. Admiral Dönitz was baffled. His U-boat commanders were reporting constant, inescapable air patrols in an area that should have been safe. His U-boats were vanishing. He ordered his crews to fight back. He equipped the U-boats with more anti-aircraft guns and ordered them to stay on the surface and shoot down the makeshift carrier planes. This was a fatal mistake. The carrier planes, like the Wildcat, were designed for air-to-air combat. They tore into the exposed U-boat gun crews with their .650 caliber machine guns. Once the gunners were suppressed, the Avengers would come in with their depth charges and Fido homing torpedoes. The results were catastrophic for the German U-boat fleet. In that single month, Black May 1943, Admiral Dönitz lost 41 U-boats, 1/3 of his entire frontline operational fleet, destroyed in just 30 days. The Impractical escort carriers were sinking U-boats faster than German factories could build them. The kill ratios, once heavily in favor of the Germans, completely reversed. The baby Flattops, the ships the Navy laughed at, had become Hitler's U-boat nightmare. By the end of the month, a stunned Admiral Dönitz had no choice. He issued a historic order. He pulled almost all his remaining wolfpacks out of the North Atlantic. The Black Pit was closed. The Battle of the Atlantic, the longest and most critical campaign of the war, had effectively been won. The convoys could now sail to Britain with dramatically reduced losses. The buildup for the D-Day invasion could finally begin in earnest. The makeshift substitutes had saved the war. But for the combustible, vulnerable, and expendable crews of the escort carriers, their greatest test was yet to come. The war in the Atlantic was winding down. Now they were needed in the Pacific for the final bloody invasion of Japan. And there, they would not be hunting slow submarines. They would be facing the largest battleships in the world. October 25th, 1944. The ocean east of Samar Island, Philippines. The situation is desperate. The massive American invasion of Leyte Gulf is underway, and the Imperial Japanese Navy has launched its final complex counterattack, a plan called Shogo-1. A small task force of American ships, call sign Taffy 3, is patrolling the area. Taffy 3 is composed of 6 baby Flattops, the same Casablanca-class carriers built by Kaiser. They are accompanied by a handful of destroyers and even smaller destroyer escorts. Their mission is simple: provide air support for the troops on the beach and hunt for submarines. They are not expecting a fleet action. At 6:47 a.m., a lookout on the carrier USS Fanshawe Bay screams into his microphone, "Contact, multiple masts, large ships, bearing 090. Admiral Clifton Sprague, the commander of Taffy 3, raises his binoculars. His blood runs cold. Steaming directly towards his small, slow group of expendable carriers is the most powerful surface fleet Japan has left. 4 massive battleships, including the largest battleship ever built, the super-battleship Yamato, 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, 11 destroyers. This is Admiral Takeo Kurita's center force. The baby Flattops have stumbled directly into the path of a giant. The mismatch is not just a joke, it is a slaughter waiting to happen. The Yamato's 18-inch guns can hurl a shell the weight of a car over 26 miles. The baby Flattops have a single, tiny 5-inch gun on their stern. They are unarmored. A single hit from a battleship would vaporize one. And they are slow. Kurita's fleet is steaming at 30 knots. The escort carriers can barely make 19. Escape is impossible. Admiral Kurita, on the bridge of the Yamato, cannot believe his eyes. He was expecting to fight the main American Third Fleet. Instead, he has found only these small, slow, impractical carriers. This will be a massacre. On the bridge of the Fanshawe Bay, Admiral Sprague knows he has only one option. He turns his ships into a nearby rain squall for cover and gives the order that will become legendary in naval history. "Small boys," he radios to his destroyer screen, "attack." He then turns to his carriers and gives the impossible order, "launch aircraft." What happens next is one of the most heroic, desperate, and suicidal charges in the annals of warfare. The combustible, vulnerable, and expendable ships turn and fight. The destroyers, ships like the USS Johnston and USS Hull, charge towards the battleships. They are like terriers attacking bears. They steam directly into the wall of shell fire, zigzagging wildly, launching their torpedoes at point-blank range before being blasted to pieces. Above them, the pilots of Taffy 3 take off. They have no torpedoes. They have no armor-piercing bombs. They were loaded for ground support. They attack the battleships. With what they have, they strafe the decks with machine gun fire. They drop small anti-personnel bombs which bounce harmlessly off the thick battleship armor. When their ammunition runs out, the pilots keep attacking. They make dry runs, diving their planes directly at the Japanese bridges, pulling up at the last second, forcing the ships to turn and break formation. They are trying to draw fire, to distract the giants, to protect their baby flattops. The Japanese fleet is thrown into chaos. Kurita is stunned. This tiny, impractical force is not running. It is attacking him with a fury he has never seen. The suicidal destroyer charges and the relentless hornet-like air attacks confuse him. He believes he is facing a much larger, more powerful American fleet. After hours of brutal, one-sided combat in which Taffy 3 suffers grievous losses, Admiral Kurita loses his nerve. Believing he has fought the main American fleet and fearing more air attacks, he turns his massive force around and retreats. The baby flattops had done the impossible. They had saved the entire D-Day-style invasion of the Philippines by defeating the most powerful surface fleet in the Japanese Navy. The ships that Admiral King had called makeshift substitutes and impractical had now, undeniably, proven their worth twice. First, they had hunted the wolves of the Atlantic, the U-boats, to extinction and won the war's most critical supply battle. And then, in the Pacific, they had faced down giants and made the giants blink first. They were the combustible, vulnerable, and expendable ships that, in the end, were simply indispensable.